All right, then hello everybody. This is Yara here, and I'm over here. We're gonna do a prank kids guide. I mean, by we, I mean Zach is gonna do a prank kids guide. This is the prank kids masters. You may recognize him from the podcast, from the deck profiles, from the tournaments, from a bunch of places. So, uh, Zach, how are you?
I feel real good after that intro. I mean, hearing you hype me up's kind of nice. Like I'm not even playing. That's kind of nice hearing that. Sheesh. You're too kind, Yada. You're too kind.
All right, all right.
So yeah, now that Yada finally accepts that Prank Kids is a top tier deck, now we can do the guide.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so this part of the video, depending on how Yada wants to cut it, I'm just gonna go over what all the Prank Kids do, and specifically their role in the deck. And then I'll go over some option cards, the extra deck, and then what to side in against this deck. I definitely want this guide to be usable for people who aren't Prank Kids players. Not that I want people to start beating Prank Kids because, best deck. But I want other people to get some use out of it. So let's start right away with Fansies. Prank Kids Fansies is probably the best one in the deck. If it's sent to graveyard as fusion or link material for a Prank Kids monster, you can send any Prank Kids card from deck to graveyard, and then special summon a Prank Kids from deck that's not Fansies. This card's kind of the best one because it lets you play around stuff like Imperm, Veiler, Skill Drain, and other effect negation. So if anything ever gets negated, you can send what you were gonna search later off of this and just add it back with something like Doodle or Bower Bark. Dropsies has the same condition, except for you gain 1,000 life points. Red is your inflict 500 life points to your opponent. These are the ones that are really busted in time, and if you're going in to time against Prank Kids, these are the ones that you want to focus on negating. Just a little side note, Lampsies cannot be activated under something like Prosperity or Dark Rule or No More because you cannot meet the condition of inflicting 500 damage to your opponent. So if you're not a Prank Kids player, or you are one actually, keep that in mind. Roxy's, this is almost universally known as the worst one, but it's starting to see a little bit more popularity. Its effect when it's sent to graveyard is banish a card from your hand, draw one card, and then special summon one other than rock. The only real problem with it is you have to do the banish and draw one to summon from it, which means if it's the only card in your hand, it's basically useless. On the bright side, though, it lets you cycle your hand. This, along with pranks, is the reason that you get to cycle 2 to 3 cards every turn. So this is starting to see more play, especially as the deck techs out for more options. Next is the field spell Prank Kids Place. When it's activated, add any Prank Kids monster from deck to hand. Most of the time, this is like Ash Bait or Cyclone Bait. If you're playing one card combo deck, then you don't really need it. If you're playing poly deck, you might want to see it resolve more often, but it's not the end of the world. Its secondary effect is if you fusion summon, all your monsters gain 500 attack permanently. If you link summon, all your opponent's monsters lose 500 attack permanently. This only really comes up in times where you're trying to beat over something like Dragoon. You can usually get over Dragoon if you fusion summon a Butler. And then maybe like Link Summon, and that could be how you get over it. It doesn't come up too much, but it's our main way of getting around something like Dragoon or a Winda. Prank Kids Pandemonium. This is the archetypal fusion spell that we can search by Doodle Doo or we can send by Fansies. This card is absolutely busted as a quick play spell, but there are 2 problems with it. It is during the main phase only, which means you can't use it in battle phase for extra attacks, and you can't use it in standby in case you get like Twisted or Cycloned. So that kind of hurts. And then for the rest of the turn, you cannot normal or special summon monsters except Prank Kids monsters. So something to watch out for is sometimes newer Prank Kids players will use it, summon Rocket Ride, summon a bunch of other monsters, and then like try to make access code for a game. You do have to keep this restriction in mind as you play. Most of the time when you're going through combos, if it's like turn 3 for the Prank Kid player or something, you'll want to make access code before you do your fusion play. Prank Kids Pranks. This card was not as popular when the deck first came out, but it's really essential nowadays. You can discard one Prank Kids card, special summon a Prank Kids token. This really helps with chain blocking your normal summon. If you only have a normal summon and it goes to graveyard, it can get stopped with anything like Ash. But if you summon the token and your normal summon to go into Doodle Doo, then you can get around the Ash by chain blocking with the Doodle Doo. This card's nuts for that. And then during the end phase, target 3 Prank Kids cards in your graveyard, shuffle all 3 into the deck, and then draw 1 card. This card allows you to have an artificial grind game. Your grind game won't last forever because it only shuffles 3 cards. But it's kind of amazing drawing 1 card during every end phase. It basically means you draw 2 every turn, which is kind of busted, especially because this deck runs anywhere between 9 and 15 hand traps. Polymerization. This is a card that was really popular when the deck first came out because we didn't have Meow Meow and you had to rely on this card. And then it's starting to see more popularity now as we see the amount of hand traps ramp up in decks. Like Tri Brigade are starting to run more. Poly acts as a way to get around Ash Blossom, or it acts as an extender. It's really nice in the deck. Even just having 1 kid in Polymerization makes your 1 card combo even better. It turns just a Butler board into a Butler plus an Xyz board. Your Xyz either being like Dweller or Toad. So this card is amazing for that. Parallel Exceed. This is something that didn't really see much play earlier in the Prank Kids deck when we got Meow Meow and Phantom Rage, but it's starting to see more play, especially popularized by Paxwin and the Remote Duel YCS. The main function of this is to chain block your first Prank Kid that goes to graveyard, which means you can't get ashed. For those who don't play Prank Kids or have never played against Prank Kids much, if you don't ash their first Prank Kid in graveyard, you're probably not going to get to ash anything else. Just about the whole combo they do is chain blocked, except for that first graveyard effect. So Parallel Exceed solves that problem. The only problem inherently with the Parallel Exceed is it plays into Nibiru way faster. If you summon both of the Parallel Exceeds from deck, then oftentimes they'll nib you before you even get into the Doodle Doo. And most of the time you want to get into Doodle Doo before they nib you. That way you can at least get some resources out of it. So this card's pretty risky. It's definitely a main deck staple when Nibiru's fading out of the format, kind of like it was earlier this format. But this card will definitely not be in the main deck if Nib becomes mandatory. Instant Fusion. Really nice in the deck. It works as either an extender to try to get around a hand trap on your normal summon, or it works as something like Rocket Ride, because Rocket Ride is level 5. Instant Fusion can turn into summoning 2 Link 2s back from the graveyard if your graveyard is already full. So the card can be really broken. It basically becomes 1 card access code after turn 1. So it's really nice. Definitely a staple. 1 for 1. This card was found in PAX lists. I don't know why Prank Kids players weren't playing it since November. Probably because we didn't need it and we weren't scared of hand traps. But now that we're a little bit more scared of hand traps, it's seeing a little bit of resurgence, especially it being seen in PAX list. Send any monster from hand to graveyard, which usually isn't a problem because you're playing 9 to 15 hand traps plus Parallel Seed plus 15 kid names. And then summon a Fansies from deck. Next, we have Pot of Desires. Pot of Desires is an absolute amazing card in this deck. Pot of Desires was originally popularized in this deck by Pack and Gabriel Susi, who's the EUWCQ 2019 champion. He won with Salamangreat. And their theory was to build the deck like Salamangreat, i.e. using the Desires. So that's how this deck, or that's how it came into this deck. It's been a little bit debated back and forth ever since it came into the deck. People like Henko Chow cited they didn't like it because it ruins your grind game if you banish like 3 or more kids. And then other people argued back that just drawing 2 cards, especially if it's like 2 hand traps off that card, instantly wins you the game. So it's relatively low risk for a high reward. It's great. It's just not great in like game 2 or game 3. Next is Triple Tactics Talent. This was more or less popularized by Pax List. He took out Pot of Desires to play this instead. Card's just overall amazing, especially because you almost never get through a prank turn without seeing a monster effect activated by your opponent, whether it be a hand trap or something else. So it's working out really well. Next on to some of the optional main deck cards that have been seeing some play. Thunder Dragon Fusion. This is oftentimes played in the Verte Anaconda package as a way to play around something like Bell or Twin Twisters. For those who are prank its player, you do normal combo, and then instead of going into Bow Wow at the end of your turn, you would go into Verte. If you go into Verte, you don't have to worry about Twin Twisters or Ghost Spells on your Bow Wow, and you can still keep the Butler. The problem with that, though, is you lose way harder to stuff like Imperm or Veiler, which are starting to see more play this format. Another cool thing about Thunder Dragon Fusion is after it's sent to graveyard, the next turn you can banish it to add a Fansies from deck to hand, since Fansies is Thunder. So that's just a cool aspect of the card. Next is Red Eyes Fusion. People who play the Verte package will sometimes try to squish in Dragoon. I don't think the deck has seen real success with the Dragoon package, except for Joe Bogley's 60-card list of Prank Kids. I mean, Dragoon's nice, especially because it helps you out the opponent's Dragoon, because this deck kind of struggles against stuff like Dragoon. But it's definitely not common to see Red Eyes Fusion. And then last, this card was played way more in Prank Kids back in November, December, January when we first got Meow Meow. You could play Mystic Mine relatively easy in this deck because almost all your links and fusions tribute for cost, which means you can really clear your board very easily. For those that are curious, there's a loop that Prank Kids can do under Mystic Mine where they start on 0 monsters and end on 0 monsters, but they end up doing like 2,500 damage or 2,500 worth of life point differential each turn. So this card's really nuts, especially going second. You can basically just tribute off whatever you make and then leave an empty board for Mystic Mine. Going into the extra deck, Meow Meow Mew. This is what we got in November in Phantom Rage. This is basically what enabled the deck to come to life. The deck was relatively worthless when it came out in 2018, except for Dinkabooey's YCS Milan 2018 win. It's like the deck was okay, but you really had to max out on Poly, and then they even played Invocation so that they could get more polymerization-like effects. But this card turned the deck into 15 one-card starters that all end on double Raigeki plus draw 2. This card is absolutely nuts. It's probably a little bit more than any Prank Kids player was wishing for when we wanted a Link 1. But we'll take it. Card's amazing. A side note for people who don't play Prank Kids or aren't familiar with the deck, you can only Link summon Prank Kids Meow Meow Mew once per turn. So don't let them make more than 2 on you. Next is Dodo Doodle Doo. This is probably the second best Link card in the deck. If it's Link summoned, add any Prank Kid spell or trap from deck to hand, which means you can add the fusion spell, you can add the pranks, which is going to recycle your stuff, or you can add the field spell placed and then add another name. So basically it searches anything in the deck, assuming you don't get trolled. This card is absolutely amazing. And then second effect, you contribute this card, not a quick effect. Target 2 Prank Kids cards with different names in your graveyard, except Link monsters. Add them to your hand. So this card on itself is just absolutely amazing. If they hit this card to like 1 or 0, the deck's really going to hurt. Bow Wow Bark. It's the same tribute effect as Dodo Doodle Doo, except for it's only on the opponent's turn as a quick effect. So tribute it, add 2 Prank Kids cards with different names, except Link monsters, add them to your hand. 2 other side notes with this card. If it activates the tribute effect, no Prank Kid monsters can be destroyed by your opponent's card effect this turn. That's even if they weren't on the field already yet. So watch out for that. If they resolve Bow Wow Bark, don't be sending Intis off like Nadir Servant or the Diviner of Herald. And then also, the first effect, a Prank Kid monster this card points to gains 1,000 attack. This only really comes up in situations where you're going for game or you need to get past a Dragoon. It's not really like the most important part of the card, but it's something that's there. Lastly, we have Rip Roaring Roaster. It is quick effect, tribute this card, destroy all spells and traps your opponent controls. So if you already have Meow Meow engrave, you can banish Meow Meow for the tribute the first time and then activate it again. Rip Roaring Roaster is not a once per turn at all. So you effectively get 2 Harpy's Feather Dusters whenever you want as a quick effect. So card's kind of nice, especially when you're going into like back row formats. And then the second effect, if it's sent to graveyard by an opponent's card, you can target 1 card in your graveyard, accept a link, add it to your hand. The key distinction for this card is it adds any 1 card in graveyard. It can add anything. So if you're stuck in a bad place, you can add something like Mystic Mine. You can add a Pankratops that's already been engraved. You can, of course, add any prank card. But there's definitely some creative plays you can do with this, especially if you have powerful one-ofs like Reborn or Mystic Mine already in the grave. Prank Kids Rocket Ride. This is probably the best instant fusion target you have, and then this is also what builds some of the mega boards that you can do in Prank Kids turn 1. Its main effect, you contribute this card, target 2 Prank Kids non-fusions with different names in your graveyard, special summon them, but they cannot attack this turn. Most of the time, when you're resolving Rocket Ride past turn 1, you're summoning Doodle and Bow Wow Bark back, which will give you 4 cards back to hand if you tribute them. Or it can give you like Rip Roar and Roaster when you use Rocket Ride. Or if you summoned off Instant Fusion, then that's how you would make the access code, by summoning both Link 2s back. The other effect of Rocket Ride doesn't come up except for if you're using like Mystic Mine or you need to chain block something. It's if this card is fusion summoned, you can have this card lose 1,000 attack this turn. Also, it cannot attack. It can attack directly this turn. It can attack directly. This is really important when you're trying to chain block the pranks that you send to grave for something like Poly. And you can use it turn 1. I know it says you can attack directly this turn, but since the effect also includes something that decreases your attack, it means that you can use it on turn 1. So really keep that in mind, especially for Poly combos when you need to chain block. Weather Washer, I borderline think this is like the best card in the deck. I think if Butler gets hit, we're just going to play Weather Washer control. Weather Washer is just stupid amazing. If any Prank Kids card attacks while this card's on the field, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step, which means stuff like Whiptail and Sky Striker Ray are absolutely useless. The card's absolutely busted in the Sky Striker match when they don't get to use Ray at all. The second effect, which is even better, during the opponent's turn, quick effect, tribute this card, then target 2 Prank Kids non-fusion monsters with different names in graveyard, special summon them, they cannot be destroyed by battle this turn. So you can either summon 2 of the main deck Prank Kids if you want to try to stall for a turn and you need like 1 more turn, or you need to get past the battle phase, or you can summon both the links back. Card's just nuts. Keynote on the Weather Washer, it is a hard once per turn, so even if you use the Meow Meow, you can't use it again. Also, one more note, if they use Bow Wow Bark and Weather Washer's effect, they'll essentially have 2 Prank Kids monsters that cannot be destroyed by battle or card effect. Most decks can't out two monsters that can't be destroyed by battle or card effect. So odds are they're going to live another turn. Weather Washer is just amazing. Battle Butler, this is the reason the deck is absolutely tier 1. Quick effect, tribute this card, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. When you have something like Meow Meow in that banishes itself for cost, then it becomes a double Raigeki. And then if this card is sent to graveyard by an opponent's card, you can target a non-fusion monster in your graveyard, special summon it. This also is not limiting, so you can summon any Link monster. You can summon something like Pankratops back. You can summon a Stray Nibiru back if you need 3,000. Just any non-fusion monster. It's really amazing. And then for the rest of the extra deck, we have some cards that you can run to fill in slots. Verte Anaconda, this is for the Thunder Dragon Fusion play or the Red Eyes Fusion play. It sees some play. It's not mandatory in everything. Asa, this was seen in, I believe, Sheem's LCS list that got top 16 at the last LCS. This is basically your only way to get around a Contact C. You either have to make Asa or something like Nightmare Phoenix. Asa, in my opinion, is the preferred target because then you can use it to climb into something like a Link 3. Dragoon, if you play Red Eyes Fusion, again, not many people play it. Nightmare Phoenix. Nightmare Phoenix is super easy to make in the deck, especially on turn 3 for the Prank Kids player. Especially because if you already have like a doodle on the field, you can get its co-link effect to destroy Spell Trap and then draw. Nightmare Phoenix, do the same thing. You can link climb, get the draw and the spin. Access Code. Access Code is the primary finisher in the deck. You can make it super easily because you always have basically unlimited link material from the get-go. And it being not able to respond to things is kind of nuts in this game. Abyss Dweller, you can either make this hard with 2 Roxys, or you can just do it with a Paralog Seed. This card is still kind of nuts in this meta. So it's definitely worth looking at. And then Totally Awesome, 2 level 2 Aquas. You can make that with 2 Dropsies. It's a free negate. And then if you want to set it to your field, like if it's an IDP or something, it just makes it even better. Also, keynote for Totally Awesome. If this card is sent to graveyard, target any water in your graveyard, add it to hand. You can add back Dropsies. In fact, most of the Butler plus Totally Awesome, or the Butler plus Totally Awesome setups, you have to use the Totally Awesome's graveyard effect to get the last material for Butler, aka Dropsies, in hand. Okay, last up for this section, we have cards that you should side against Prank Kids. Ash Blossom, if they have just a normal summon with no extender and you Ash Blossom their first effect in graveyard, you're probably going to win the game because the Prank Kids player usually can't do anything past that. Most of the time they have to open like 2 other specific cards to get around an Ash Blossom. Ghost Bell, this card is stupid amazing against the deck because both the Link 2s and both the Fusion 2s tribute themselves to add back cards from graveyard to hand or to special summon them. So if you have a Ghost Spell, you can hit something like the Doodle or preferably the Bow Wow Bark on the opponent's turn. Most of the time, Prank Kids player, unless they opened 3+ names, if you hit the Bow Wow Bark with your Ghost Spell, they're probably not going to make Butler that turn. Also, if you hit like Rocket Ride on the instant fusion, then their instant fusion's completely gone. Contact C, this card is stupid good against the Prank Kids deck. Once they make once they normal summon their Prank Kid monster, you can summon Contact C to their board, and then they have to make something like Asa or Nightmare Phoenix. The insane part about that is they essentially lose out on all their Prank Kids effects because the Prank Kids have to be sent for a Prank Kids monster specifically. If they're link summoned into something like Asa, Nightmare Phoenix, Nightmare Unicorn, or Access Code, they won't trigger at all. So using this will just burn up their normal summon, and it's really amazing. The only way that they play through this is if they have something like maybe 1-for-1, or that's about it. Card's really nuts. Nibiru, almost always your Prank Kid player will probably play into Nibiru. The only way that they don't play into Nibiru is if they open 2 names that aren't Roxy's and they're consciously trying to play around it. Most of the time, Prank Kids players might not play around it turn 1. So absolutely go for it. I think the best time to nib them is probably at the very end, or maybe right before they tribute off their Doodle in combo. Nib hurts the deck a lot, and most of the time when they get nibbed, it actually is a turn ender. Dimension Shifter, you resolve this, the Prank Kids player isn't going to play. There's nothing that they can do about this. It just happens. Twin Twister and Cosmic Cyclone, they have the same purpose. It's just quick effect spell trap destruction that you can use in standby phase. If you can destroy their Pandemonium in the standby phase, then they won't get to use it at all, and then they're basically just stuck with a Link 2 that gets rid of itself and a Stray Prank Kid monster. If you have any of these cards, you probably need to be playing at least a playset of one of them in your side deck, because without them, it's really hard to win the Prank Kids matchup. I mean, just having them enables you to win the game outright. IO, it's good against a deck that runs 20 spell cards. Anti-spell, good against a deck that runs 20 spell cards. Solemn Strike, if you hit the summon of their Link monster, then you get rid of the Link monster off the field, and they don't get their effect because it has to go for a successful summon of a Prank Kids monster. So striking their Meow Meow is really amazing. Gozen and Rivalry, deck can't play under it at all. There's absolutely no way. Just resolving one of these against a Prank Kids player, they're going to be stuck until they find spell or trap card destruction. On the inverse, though, the deck really struggles with Gozen Match and Rivalry, but it can really do well under There Can Be Only One. The deck can basically play under There Can Be Only One without breaking a sweat. It only adjusts some play lines, and you can't play around certain hand traps, but it's really not the end of the world. And then last off, here's an example deck list. This has taken some inspiration from Hashim's LCS list and Pac's YCS list. As you can see, we're playing 15 kids. If you don't want to play 15 kids, which you probably should if you're playing Poly, you can cut something like a Roxy's, but honestly, 15 kids is the way to go. If you don't see a kid, you're not playing the game. 2 pranks, you'd either play 1 if you're not playing Desires, or 2 if you are playing Desires. There's no varying from that. It's either the 1 or 2. Nothing else. 3 Pandemonium, because you always want to see it, and if you open it, then you can search different stuff with your doodle, and then sometimes you don't even have to worry about opening another name. Opening Pandemonium is sometimes like opening another name. Poly, card's kind of nuts right now, and the deck hard loses to Ash. This says that you won't hard lose to Ash. And then the deck could play anywhere between 9 and 15 hand traps. Here's the 9. If you wanted to play 15, you would cut the 3 Poly and the 3 Parallel to play 12 and then 15 hand traps. Instant Fusion, it's a mandatory one of. It gets around Nibiru, and it's a 1-card access code after the first turn. Pot of Desires, it says draw 2 for free. Why not? Parallel Exceed makes Dweller even easier. And then also chain blocks for normal summon. And then 1 for 1 as a Wonderful Extender. These are the typical ratios for what you see in the extra deck. 3 Meow Meow Mew, 3 Doodle Doo, 1 Bow Wow Bark, and then some people play 1 Roaster, some people don't. It depends on what combos you want to be able to use. 1 of each fusion, and then you can play Nightmare Phoenix, Nightmare Unicorn, Access Code Talker, and then you can play either 0 Xyz, 1 Xyz, or both Xyz. If you're playing both Xyz, or if you're playing Parallel, you probably want to play Dweller and Toad. If you're not playing Parallel, then you're probably just going to play Toad or no Xyz. So that's that part. Woo.